All right, this is the another little video for you guys about how to write your critical analysis papers. The last video, I went over what you need in your introduction. I still have it highlighted up here. So your dramatic introduction, your transition sentence, and your summary. Okay, but let me get rid of all of that. What I want to concentrate on now is your thesis statement. So after your introduction, you need to add your thesis statement in a separate paragraph. Okay, in a separate paragraph, just like I've done here. Usually, a thesis statement comes at the end of your introduction, so it would come somewhere, right after this period, right here. So usually it's at the end of the introduction, but I want you to write a separate paragraph for a couple of reasons. First, writing a separate paragraph thesis statement basically forces you to write an actual thesis statement. Sometimes I get critical analysis papers that have no thesis statement whatsoever. So having to write a separate paragraph will force you to come up with a thesis statement. Secondly, it forces your thesis statement to be complex and informative. All right, it will have to be between 2 to 3 sentences long, okay, or one complex and informative sentences. But usually, if it's going to be one paragraph by itself, it needs to be between 2 and 3 sentences long. So it needs to be a complex and informative thesis statement. So that's why I'm going to ask you to write a separate paragraph thesis statement. Okay, so let me highlight this. This is my thesis statement down here. So basically, a thesis statement informs your reader in miniature what your argument is. Okay, so your thesis statement informs your reader in miniature what your ultimate argument is about the article, what your response to it is. So basically, whether or not you find the article that you've read and that you've analyzed to be convincing or unconvincing, or a little bit of both. This paragraph right here tells the reader exactly what your reaction to that article is and what your argument is going to be in the rest of the paper. Whether or not you find it convincing, or you didn't find it convincing, or you have mixed feelings about it. Basically, when it comes to writing a thesis statement, you can do one of 3 things. You can agree with the article. Okay, so you can agree with the article, or you can disagree with the article. 2 very, very simple ways to respond to an article. You can agree, or you can disagree. When it comes to writing your thesis statement, however, you have to explain to the reader briefly, but being informative at the same time. You have to explain to them the reasons, your reasons why you find the article to be convincing, why you agree with it. What are your reasons for that? Same thing if you disagree with an article. You have to give your reader an idea of why you find it unconvincing or why you disagree with the article in your thesis statement. Okay? You can also agree and disagree with an article at the same time. You don't have to take a side. All right? You can kind of like sit on the fence, if you want to put it that way. In fact, agreeing and disagreeing with an article at the same time makes it more complex, makes your article more complex. Basically, you're saying to the reader, look, I found a lot of the information in this article to be convincing. I found this particular argument or this use of evidence or whatever convincing. However, there were other parts in this article that I was unsure about, or I was skeptical about, or I wasn't fully convinced about for these reasons. And you can say that in your thesis statement, okay? And that'll give the reader an idea. So you can agree and disagree, which is what I've done here. So let me read out what my thesis statement to Carr's article is. I say, I'm in 2 minds about Carr's article. First, I agree with Carr's opinion that the internet is affecting concentration and contemplation. My own personal experience corroborates this. Also, his use of personal anecdotes and analogy help me relate to and understand his claims more fully. However, Looking more closely at some of the evidence that Carr uses to support his claims uncovers flaws in reasoning that ultimately undermine his position. So what I'm saying there is like, yeah, I agree with a lot of what Carr's saying. A lot of my own personal experience corroborates what he's saying. I also like some of the evidence and the rhetorical strategies that he's using, such as personal anecdotes, an analogy, and so forth. This helps me engage with the article a little bit more and ultimately agree with what he's saying. However, there were parts in this article that I didn't agree with, or I thought that they were faulty. Some of his claims, I said, uncover some sort of flaws in reasoning. So I point that out. So yes, while I agree with a lot of what Carr is saying, I'm skeptical about what he says in other parts of the article. So you can do that, and that actually makes your article a little bit more complex. But as I said, there are three things that you can do. You can agree with the article, just explain your reasons why. You can disagree with the article, just explain your reasons why. Or you can agree and disagree with the article, but again, just explain your reasons why. And that should be between 2 to 3 sentences long in a separate thesis paragraph. Okay, the third thing and final thing about your thesis, when it comes to writing your body paragraphs, which is what's down here, this is when you integrate evidence and quotations and you start doing your analysis and so forth. Basically, your paragraphs should follow the order of your thesis. So whatever you say in your thesis statement here, you should follow that order or lay that order out in your body paragraphs. Okay, so it should follow the same logic and argument that you're making in your thesis. So for example, I say here, first, I agree with Carr's opinion that the internet is affecting our concentration and contemplation. My own personal experience corroborates this. Also, I like his use of analogy and anecdotes because it makes me understand his points and relate to his points more fully. This is exactly how I start my own paper. So my first topic sentence reflects what I say in my thesis. So I say Carr's use of evidence and the strategy of analogy combined to make what on an initial reading seems a very convincing argument about the effect the internet is having on our brains. And then I go into detail about that and I analyze it and I explain what I mean. My second body paragraph again corroborates my thesis. While Carr's use of personal experience makes his article more relatable and credible, his use of analogy makes his ideas more concrete and understandable. So again, I'm following the logic of my thesis. The final thing I say in my thesis is I'm skeptical about some of the evidence that he uses. I think there's flaws in reasoning. Okay? So this is my final point that I want to bring up here. Okay? So this is the final paragraph, my final point that I want to make in my paper. So while Carr's use of evidence and analogy is often convincing, there are several times where his supportive evidence and logical reasoning collapse under critical scrutiny, thus undermining the credibility of his argument and claims. So my topic sentences, each of my topic sentences in my body paragraphs lay out logically and in the same order what I say here in my thesis. So as I said, a thesis is, in miniature, what you're going to be arguing in your body paragraphs. You just need to follow the same logic and the same order that you lay out in your thesis. So don't start talking about different things down here than what you laid out in your thesis, okay? What you say in your thesis should be reflected in your topic sentences and the development of your paragraphs, okay? Okay, I'm going to shut up again.